In this lesson, we're going to talk about case studies and more specifically what their intended purpose is, when to use them, and what it's going to look like, especially for this class and your upcoming assignment. A case study is a detailed study of a specific subject, such as a person, group, place, event, organization, or phenomenon. Case studies are commonly used in social, educational, clinical, and business research. A case study research design usually involves qualitative methods, but quantitative methods are sometimes also used. Case studies are good for describing, comparing, evaluating, and understanding different aspects of a research problem. So here's what we're going to go over. When to do a case study, what are the appropriate times and when will they be most beneficial. We'll talk about how to select a case. We'll begin to delve into theoretical framework and how that's relevant to you, both as a future researcher and as a practitioner. We'll also discuss how to collect your data, and then we'll talk about how you can describe and analyze the case. A case study is an appropriate research design when you want to gain concrete, contextual, in-depth knowledge about a specific real-world subject. It allows you to explore the key characteristics, meaning, and implication of the case. Case studies are often a good choice in a thesis or dissertation, but as a practitioner, they're really beneficial for you to understand an entire phenomenon. We can look at some past ag-related ones that have been published within our research journal for ag communications. One is the crisis and the risk communication that happened with Bluebell when they had their listeria outbreak. But case studies, they keep your project focused and manageable when you don't have the time or resources to do a large-scale research project. When you think about typical consumer research, it can be very expensive because you're having to pay people to participate, and you want a lot of people to participate because then you can generalize the results of the data that you collected to a large audience. So for example, if you wanted to understand how Texans think about HEB as a brand, you'd have to survey the entirety, or your sample would have to be representative of Texas as a state, and it can be expensive. So case studies offer another opportunity for you to understand a specific phenomenon. You might use just one complex case study where you explore a single subject in depth, or you might conduct multiple case studies to help compare and illuminate different aspects of your research problem. So here are some research questions and a corresponding case study. So I want you to take a look at these. So I think you're going to notice once you make your way down the list that the research question is broad, and the case study provides a specific event or phenomenon that you can study that will help you address the research question. Let's move on to kind of this first step in developing a case study. Once you developed your problem statement or research questions, you should be ready to choose a specific case that you want to focus on. A good case study should have the potential to provide new or unexpected insights into the subject, challenge or complicate existing assumptions and theories. So another portion is that you need to propose a practical course of action to resolve a problem, open up new directions for future research. Additionally, unlike qualitative or quantitative or experimental research, a strong case study does not require random or representative sampling. So this is kind of what I touched on a little bit before, is that we can select a small or a more detailed event instead of having to use traditional quantitative methods where we have to sample a very large group. Case studies often deliberately focus on unusual, neglected, or outlying cases, which may shed some new light on the research problem. So in the two boxes, the orange boxes, we can see some examples, and take a look at those. We can see an example of an outline case study, and we can also see an example of a representative case study. I want you to take some time to think about what an outlier is, or an outlying case. When we look back to your statistics class, think about a typical bell curve, and that bell curve is kind of a very predictable curve that we expect people to appear on. However, when we see data points that are far off of that curve, we know that they may not be part of the normal group, and so we consider those an outlier, something that we necessarily didn't expect or predict. Define the subject of the study. A case study focuses on a single individual, small group of people, or occasionally a single event. You'll be conducting qualitative research to find specific details and descriptions of how your subject is affected. As an example, a medical case study might study how a single patient is infected by an injury. A psychology case study might study a small group of people in an experimental form of therapy. Case studies are not designed for a large group study or statistical analysis. So, kind of taking what you learned in stats, is very based in the quantitative realm, where you deal with data points, and here we are really concerned about garnering and collecting thick, rich, descriptive details. Decide between prospective and retrospective research. Prospective case studies perform new studies of their own involving individuals or small groups, whereas retrospective case studies examine a small number of past cases related to the subject of the study and do not require a new involvement with the subject of these cases. A case study may or may not include both types of research. For this assignment that's coming up, you're going to be using a retrospective case study. So you're going to be looking at the past and the things that led up to the development of a new type of media in the context of agriculture. While case studies focus more on concrete details than general theories, they should usually and typically will have some connection to theory in the field. This way, the case study is not just an isolated description, but is integrated into existing knowledge about the topic. It might aim to exemplify a theory by showing how it explains the case under investigation. It could also expand on a theory by uncovering new concepts and ideas that need to be incorporated. It can also challenge a theory by exploring an outlier case that doesn't fit the established assumptions. To ensure that your analysis of the case has a solid academic grounding, you should conduct a literature review of sources related to the topic and develop a theoretical framework. This means identifying key concepts and theories to guide your analysis and interpretation. For the assignment, I'm not necessarily going to require you to explore a theoretical framework. However, if you do continue on to graduate school, this is going to be something that you will explore more in depth and definitely be required to do. But a theoretical framework, especially in the communications area, we can look at things like elaboration likelihood model, spiral of silence. We can look at the hypodermic needle theory. We can look at framing theory. All of these different theories that have been researched before and tested, you can explore them and find one that you want to expand on, exemplify, or challenge within your case study. There are many different research methods you can use to collect data on your subject. Case studies tend to focus on qualitative data using methods such as interviews, observations, and analysis of primary and secondary sources. These are going to be newspaper articles, photographs, official records. Remember that a primary source will be very much so firsthand knowledge. So if we are looking at a research project that is testing two different types of feed additives, then the primary data would be the results that are written down by the researcher. Secondary source would be the research journal that was written, and a tertiary source would be a newspaper or a blog reporting on some of the findings. So for you, you're going to be collecting interviews. You'll be interviewing, you'll be collecting data through that. So you'll be collecting primary sources of data. You'll also be collecting secondary sources. So you might go and find news articles or blogs about the event that you're studying. Sometimes a case study will use quantitative data. That's not out of the realm. One practice that we use in qualitative research is triangulation. And so you will collect artifacts, and sometimes these artifacts can be quantitative data. And the idea is that if you find three pieces, you collect artifacts, you collect firsthand accounts through interviews, and you collect a survey. You use those three pieces to kind of really dial into the event that you're looking at. An example of mixed method case studies. So mixed method use both quantitative and qualitative. You can see there in the orange box on your screen. Notice we're doing qualitative data is definitely part of there, but we're also looking at quantitative data in the form of employment rates and business revenue collected. So you need to perform background research. This one's pretty self-explanatory, but you need to take the time to look at the events that help to form your new phenomenon, background research. If you're studying people, research information in their past that may have been relevant, possibly include medical history, family history, definitely history of the organization. This will be very, very relevant to what you're doing in this class. A good background knowledge of the research topic and similar case studies will help guide your own research as well, especially if you're writing a critical interest case study. Any case study, but especially case studies with a retrospective component, will benefit from a basic academic research strategy plan. All right, conducting interviews. You will need to conduct an interview. You probably need to conduct a couple of interviews. This is going to be really important for your success in this class. Depending on the total length of your case study, you might hold an interview weekly, once every month or two. It might even be just once or twice a year. Begin with the interview questions you prepared in the planning phase, then iterate into digging deeper into the topic. So describe the experience. You want to ask the participant what it's like to go through the experience that you're studying, or what it's like to be part of the system that you're studying. This next part, describe meaning. Ask the participant what the experience means to them, or what life lessons they take away from it. Ask what mental and emotional associates that they have with the subject that you're studying, whether it's a medical condition or an event, or maybe another topic. Digging deep can be very valuable. Focus. In later interviews, you prepare questions that kind of fill in the gaps of your knowledge, or that are particularly relevant to the development of your research questions and theories over the course of the study. So your timeline is going to look much shorter than what it would in a traditional thesis. So you're probably just going to have that one interview. You might do a follow-up with email. So in writing up the case study, you need to bring together all the relevant aspects to give as complete a picture as possible of the subject. How you report your findings depends on the type of research you are doing. Some case studies are structured like a standard scientific paper or thesis. That means they have separate sections or chapters for the methods, results, and discussion. while others are written in a more narrative style, aiming to explore the case from various angles and analyze its meanings and implications. But in all cases, make sure to give contextual details about the case. Connect it back to the literature or the theory and discuss how it fits into a wider pattern of debates. So for you, you're going to use kind of this traditional sections. We're going to go over the sections here in a little bit. Collect all of your data and analyze it. After reading and referring back to your original bullet points, kind of looking back at your original research question, you may find that the data reacts in a surprising manner. So when you look back at the notes you took from interviewing, or read the transcript, or read the background information you collected, you might see something appear. You might have like an aha moment. You need to pull your information together and focus it before writing case studies, especially if your research was performed in intervals across months or a year. If you're working with more than one person, you'll want to assign different sections for completion together to make sure that your case study will flow. As an example, one person may be in charge of making charts of the data you gathered, while another might write an analysis of one of the segments of your case study from the data you collected. But you're going to be working by yourself, so this isn't necessarily going to be that necessary to think about collaborating. But definitely take time to review your data, look at the transcripts, and see kind of what appears. Based on the research questions that you developed and the type of case study that you conducted, this may be a descriptive report, it may be an analytic argument grounded in a specific case, or a suggested direction for further research or projects. You want to include your most relevant observations and interviews in the case study itself, and consider attaching additional data such as the full interview as an appendix for the readers to refer to later. If writing a case study for a non-academic audience, consider using a narrative format, describing the events that occurred during your case study in chronological order, and you want to minimize the use of jargon. So essentially what this is saying is that if you are a practitioner in the industry, your case study is going to look significantly different if you're writing in an academic setting. Right now, you're in academia, so you're writing for a specific audience, which is me. So that's why we're going to take a look at the different sections of a traditional thesis or dissertation that you'll be using for this case study. So once you've gathered the necessary information, you're going to put together a draft of your analysis. It should include these sections: an introduction, identify the key problems and issues in the case study. This section will also formulate and include a thesis statement summarizing the outcomes of your analysis in 1 to 2 sentences. The next section will be a background. This is where you'll set the scene. You'll provide background information, relevant facts, and the most important issues. You also demonstrate that you have researched the problems in this case study. On the next section, you're going to provide an evaluation of the case. You're going to outline the various pieces of the case study that you're focusing on. You'll evaluate these pieces by discussing what is working and what is not working. You'll state why these parts of the case study are working or not working very well. All right, so this next section is going to be interesting. So propose solution and changes. So something might arise in your phenomenon that you're studying of ag media convergence. You can use this time to kind of provide an explanation of how this new media provided a solution for certain instances or the certain environments that we found ourselves in. But you want to explain why the solution was chosen, and you'll also need to provide some solid evidence for that to kind of pitch that case. If it's not working, I want to hear it as well. So the last section is going to be recommendations. Determine and discuss specific strategies for accomplishing the proposed solution. So if you have recommendations for what you found for maybe the industry, I think this would be a fantastic place to put that. If not, you can continue on in this last section as kind of a conclusion area to wrap things up. but really you do need to find some worth in it for people who are practicing ag communications, or anyone who is in agriculture. After you've composed the first draft of your case, read it through to check for any gaps or inconsistencies in content or structure. Think, is your thesis statement clear? Is it direct? Have you provided solid evidence? Is any component of the analysis missing? When you make the necessary revisions, it's always a good idea to proofread and edit again before you submit the final draft. All right, so the activity, use your journal on WT class to think about some possible ideas, what forms of traditional media combined. You have to be able to answer that question. That's what ag media convergence is. What two media combine to create a new media within the field of agriculture that we're using. I also want you to list at least 2 people that you can interview with their contact information. Go ahead and think about those things now so that you can save yourself some time later on. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We went over a lot of stuff. So always reach out for questions and I'll be available to get you an answer. Thanks.